The city feared him. The women desired him. But inside that mansion, every wife was waiting for the night another woman disappeared. If he places the black ring in front of you, don't smile, the old maid whispered as thunder rolled outside the mansion windows. The last woman who smiled disappeared before sunrise. I should have left the moment she said that. But the iron gates had already closed behind me, trapping me inside the Moretti estate like prey walking willingly into a gilded cage. Rain hammered against the windshield of the black town car that had picked me up from Manhattan an hour earlier. The farther we drove from the city lights, the quieter the world became until all I could hear was the storm and my own heartbeat. I pressed my fingers against the envelope resting in my lap.
$52.
Enough money to erase my mother's medical debt and save the tiny bookstore I'd spent 5 years trying to keep alive after my father died. All I had to do was become Damien Moretti's wife. Temporary, the contract had said. Strategic. Safe. But nothing about this place felt safe. The mansion appeared through the rain like something carved from shadows and old money. Massive stone walls. Iron balconies. Warm golden lights glowing behind tall windows that somehow made the entire estate feel colder. Men in dark suits stood near the entrance without umbrellas, unmoving despite the downpour. Watching. Always watching. The driver opened my door without a word. The moment my heels touched the wet marble steps, I felt it. That strange sensation of being observed before you actually see the eyes on you. I looked up toward the second floor. A figure stood behind one of the windows.
Tall.
Broad shoulders. Perfectly still. Then the curtain closed. My stomach tightened. Inside, the mansion smelled like expensive cologne, polished wood, and roses that were beginning to die. The old maid who greeted me kept her eyes lowered as she took my coat. "Dinner starts in 10 minutes, Mrs. Moretti." The title made my chest tighten. "I'm not his wife yet," I corrected softly. Her expression changed for half a second.
Pity.
"You are once he chooses you." Before I could ask what that meant, voices drifted from the dining hall ahead. Female voices. Calm on the surface, sharp underneath. The maid led me through a long corridor lined with portraits of women wearing black gowns and diamond jewelry. Every portrait had the same dark-haired man standing beside them. Damien Moretti. In some paintings he looked younger. In none of them did he look happy. Then I noticed something worse. Different women. Different wives. My pulse stumbled. "How many times has he been married?" I asked quietly. The maid stopped walking. "Too many." She pushed open the dining room doors before I could ask another question. The room fell silent instantly. For women sat around a table longer than my entire apartment. Crystal glasses reflected candlelight across faces that were beautiful, elegant, and completely unreadable. One blonde woman slowly lifted her eyes toward me and smiled without warmth. Another looked me over like she was measuring a threat. Then the doors behind me opened again. Heavy footsteps crossed the marble floor. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Damien Moretti entered the room wearing a black suit that fit him like it had been tailored onto his body.
Tall.
Dark hair brushed back. Ice blue eyes colder than the storm outside. He didn't look at the other women first. He looked directly at me. And for one terrifying second, it felt like the entire mansion belonged to him because even fear itself answered when he walked into a room. Damien Moretti did not sit down immediately. He stood at the head of the table with one hand resting lightly against the back of his chair while rain whispered against the tall windows behind him. The candles flickered across his face, softening nothing. If anything, the shadows made him look more dangerous. "Eat," he said calmly, and the room obeyed like he had issued a command instead of a suggestion. Silverware moved. Crystal glasses lifted. Nobody spoke. I sat carefully at the far end of the table, hyper-aware of every glance sliding toward me. The blonde woman across from me finally broke the silence. "You are younger than I expected." Her voice sounded smooth, practiced. Beautiful in the same way expensive perfume. Smelled beautiful. Too polished to trust. "Sophia," Damien said quietly without looking at her. One word. One warning. She smiled into her wineglass and looked away. Another woman beside her studied me with sharp green eyes. How long do you think she'll last? She asked casually, like we were discussing weather instead of a human being. My stomach tightened. Damien finally sat down. Longer than anyone who keeps asking unnecessary questions. Silence crashed over the table again. I reached for my water glass with slightly trembling fingers. Nobody missed it. I could feel their attention pressing against my skin from every direction. 4 women. 4 wives. And somehow every single one of them looked lonely. Dinner continued in strange bursts of conversation that never felt real. Discussions about charity events, real estate, imported wine. But beneath every word was tension sharp enough to cut glass. Every glance carried meaning I did not understand yet. Every smile looked dangerous. Damien barely spoke during the meal, but when he did, the room shifted around him automatically. Power moved differently around men like him. Quiet, controlled, absolute. At one point, a servant approached his chair holding a small black velvet box. The moment it appeared, every woman at the table stiffened.
Even the air changed.
Damien opened the box slowly. Inside rested a black ring carved with silver detailing. Beautiful and cold. My pulse began to race for reasons I could not explain. Sophia lowered her fork carefully. Damien, she said softly, surely tonight should remain as planned. Another wife looked suddenly nervous. The third would not even lift her eyes from her plate. Damien ignored them all. He picked up the ring between his fingers and turned toward me. I forgot how to breathe. Claire, he said, my name deep and steady in his voice. Come here. Every instinct screamed at me not to move. But refusing him in a room like this felt impossible. I stood slowly and walked toward him while the women watched me with expressions ranging from hatred to pity. Damien held the ring out for several seconds before placing it gently on the table in front of me. One soft click. That was all. But the reaction around the room terrified me more than shouting would have. Sophia went completely pale. One woman abruptly stood from the table and walked out without permission. Another laughed quietly under her breath like she had just witnessed a tragedy beginning in slow motion. I looked down at the ring. What does this mean? I whispered. Damien leaned back slightly in his chair, eyes never leaving mine. It means, he said calmly, that nobody touches you tonight. A thunderclap shook the windows at the exact same moment the dining room lights flickered once. Then twice. Somewhere deep inside the mansion, a woman screamed. The scream lasted only a second before silence swallowed the mansion again. Nobody at the table reacted. That terrified me more than the sound itself. I looked around, expecting panic, confusion, anything human. Instead, Sophia calmly lifted her wine glass. One of the women adjusted her diamond bracelet. Damien remained perfectly still beside me, his expression unreadable beneath the candlelight. What was that? I whispered. Damien finally looked up at me. A reminder, he said quietly. This house does not tolerate jealousy well. Cold spread through my chest. I stared at the black ring still resting on the table in front of me. Suddenly, it no longer looked elegant. It looked dangerous. One of the servants hurried into the room, pale and nervous. Everything has been handled, sir. Damien gave a slight nod. Good. The servant disappeared immediately, like staying too long in his presence might be fatal. I swallowed hard. Handled? Damien turned toward me slowly. Those ice-blue eyes settled on my face with terrifying calm. You ask too many questions for someone who just arrived. His voice was not cruel. That somehow made it worse. Because cruel men lost control. Damien Moretti never seemed to. Sophia leaned back in her chair and studied me carefully. You should listen to him, Claire. Curiosity has shortened many lives in this family. I looked at her then. Really looked at her. She could not have been older than 32, but exhaustion hid beneath her perfect makeup like cracks beneath expensive paint. None of these women looked loved. Decorated, yes. Protected, maybe, but not loved. Dinner ended shortly after that. One by one the wives disappeared into separate hallways escorted by silent security men in dark suits. Nobody said goodnight. Nobody touched Damien as they left. The distance between all of them felt colder than hatred. Damien stood near the fireplace while the servants cleared the table. He loosened his tie slightly, and for the first time all evening, he looked tired instead of untouchable. I hesitated before speaking. Why did they react like that when you gave me the ring? He slid one hand into his pocket. Because protection in this house is limited. Protection from what? His jaw tightened almost invisibly. From each other. Thunder rolled outside again. Rain streaked the massive windows behind him while firelight flickered across the sharp lines of his face. Everything about him looked composed, but something darker lived underneath that control. I could feel it. You should not have brought me here, I said quietly. I did not bring you here for comfort. The honesty in his voice caught me off guard. He stepped closer, close enough for me to catch the faint scent of cedar and smoke clinging to his suit jacket. I brought you here because, unlike the others, you still know how to look at people without calculating what they can give you. My heartbeat stumbled. You barely know me. I know enough. The grandfather clock somewhere deep in the mansion struck midnight. Damien glanced toward the staircase above us, and something in his expression changed instantly. Alert. Dangerous. Then the lights flickered again. This time they went out completely. Darkness swallowed the room. A soft gasp escaped my throat before I could stop it. Somewhere upstairs, glass shattered. Footsteps echoed rapidly across the second floor. Then a woman's voice whispered from the darkness above me. Run, Claire. Every hair on my arms rose. I could not see Damien anymore, but suddenly his hand closed firmly around mine.
Warm.
Steady. Possessive. Do not let go, he said quietly. And for the first time since arriving at the mansion, the great Damien Moretti sounded like a man expecting something terrible to happen. Darkness changes people. I learned that the moment the lights went out inside the Moretti mansion. 1 second, the dining room had been glowing with candlelight and polished silver. The next, everything disappeared except the sound of rain pounding against the windows and Damien's hand wrapped tightly around mine. Somewhere upstairs, another crash echoed through the house. Not loud enough to sound accidental. My pulse hammered painfully in my throat. What is happening? I whispered. Damien did not answer immediately. I felt him move closer instead, positioning himself slightly in front of me like instinct had taken over before thought. Stay behind me, he said quietly. Footsteps rushed through the hallway outside the dining room. Men's voices followed.
Low. Urgent.
Then emergency lights flickered on along the walls, washing the mansion in dim red shadows that somehow looked even more unsettling than complete darkness. Damien released my hand only long enough to pull his phone from his pocket. Lock down the east wing, he said calmly into the receiver. Nobody enters without my permission. Whoever answered spoke too quietly for me to hear. Damien's expression hardened. I do not care what Sophia claims. Do it. He ended the call and looked toward the staircase. The entire mansion suddenly felt awake around us. Security moved through the corridors. Doors opened and shut upstairs. Somewhere distant, a woman was crying softly. You said they were afraid of each other, I murmured. You did not say why. Damien's jaw tightened. Because fear keeps people predictable. And tonight, his eyes met mine in the red emergency lighting. Cold blue. Tired. Dangerous. Tonight, someone stopped being predictable. A servant hurried into the room carrying a lantern with shaking hands.
He froze when he saw Damien.
Sir, the red room. Damien went completely still. The servant lowered his eyes instantly. What about it? The door was open. Silence. Heavy and immediate. Something shifted in Damien's face so quickly I almost missed it. Not fear exactly. Something worse. Memory. Who opened it? He asked quietly. We do not know. Damien turned toward me so suddenly that my breath caught. Claire, go to your room. No, the word slipped out before I could stop it. His eyebrows lifted slightly. Probably because nobody in this house ever told him no. I swallowed hard but forced myself to continue. Everyone here keeps speaking in riddles. The screaming. The ring. The red room. I deserve to know what kind of place I walked into. For several seconds, He simply stared at me while thunder rattled the windows behind us. Then, unexpectedly, something almost amused flickered in his eyes. "You are either very brave," he said softly, "or you have absolutely no survival instinct. Maybe both." One corner of his mouth moved slightly. Not quite a smile, but enough to completely change his face for one dangerous second. Before I could process it, Sophia appeared at the dining room entrance wearing a silk black dress and an expression sharp enough to cut glass. "There you are," she said coldly. Her gaze dropped briefly to where Damien still stood too close to me. I was beginning to think our new guest had already replaced the rest of us. Damien's voice turned flat instantly. "Not tonight, Sophia." Her laugh sounded brittle. "That is the problem, Damien. It is never just one night with you anymore." The air between them tightened painfully. Years of resentment lived inside that silence. Sophia stepped closer until the red emergency lights caught the diamonds around her throat. "Tell her the truth," she said quietly without looking at me. "Tell her what happened to the first woman who wore that ring." Damien's expression darkened immediately. "Enough." But Sophia finally looked directly at me, and for the first time all evening, I saw genuine fear in her eyes. "Claire," she whispered, "if he chooses you twice in a row, you will not survive this house." The storm outside grew louder after Sophia left the dining room. Rain slammed against the tall windows hard enough to sound like fists. I stood frozen beside the table, while her warning echoed through my mind. "If he chooses you twice in a row, you will not survive this house." Damien watched the doorway she had disappeared through for several silent seconds before exhaling slowly. Tension rolled off him in waves, even though his face remained perfectly controlled. "She hates me," I said quietly. "No," he replied without looking at me. "Sophia hates uncertainty." The red emergency lights cast long shadows across the marble floor as servants hurried nervously through the hallways outside. Somewhere upstairs, a grandfather clock chimed once. The sound felt strangely lonely inside a mansion this large. "What happened to the first wife?" I asked carefully. Damien's expression closed instantly. "You should go to bed, Claire." "That is not an answer." His eyes finally lifted to mine. Ice blue, sharp enough to make my pulse stumble. "And that question is dangerous." I should have stopped pushing him. Every instinct warned me to. But something about this house made silence feel worse than fear. "You brought me here without explaining anything," I said softly. "Everyone acts like they are waiting for something terrible to happen. There are locked rooms, women who look terrified of each other, and now somebody opened a door that apparently nobody was supposed to touch. So yes, Damien, I think I deserve answers." For the first time since arriving at the mansion, he looked genuinely tired. Not angry, not cold, just exhausted in a way that settled deep behind his eyes. He walked toward the fireplace slowly and loosened his cufflinks one at a time. The first wife was named Evelyn. Even hearing him say another woman's name made the room feel colder. "She came here 13 years ago.
Smart.
Beautiful. Everyone adored her." His voice remained calm, but something underneath it felt carefully buried. "What happened?" He stared into the fire. "She tried to turn this family against itself." "Did she?" A faint, humorless smile touched his mouth. "You assume this family needed help destroying itself." I crossed my arms tightly against the chill crawling through me. "Sophia said nobody survives if you choose them twice." Damien turned then, studying me in silence long enough to make my heart beat uneven. "Do you know why I gave you the ring tonight?" "Protection?" "Partly." He stepped closer, the firelight flickering across his sharp features. "The women in this house know how to manipulate power. Money.
Fear.
Attention. But you..." His gaze moved slowly across my face like he was trying to solve something impossible. "You walked into this mansion still believing people can be honest." I almost laughed at that. "You barely know me." "I know enough to recognize innocence when I see it." The word innocence sounded dangerous in his voice. Not soft, not gentle, like something fragile trapped inside a room full of knives. Before I could answer, footsteps approached rapidly from the hallway. A younger servant appeared at the doorway breathing hard. "Sir," The security footage from the red room is gone. Damien's entire body went still. Gone. Deleted. Silence crashed through the room. The servant swallowed nervously. There is something else. Damien looked at him sharply. What? The servant hesitated before answering. Someone left a message on the wall inside the room. A cold feeling slid down my spine. What message? The servant looked directly at me then.
Pale.
Afraid. It said, he always chooses the wrong woman in the end. For the first time that night, Damien Moretti looked genuinely unsettled. I did not sleep that night. Even after Damien escorted me to my room personally and stationed 2 guards outside my door, sleep felt impossible inside a mansion where every hallway seemed to carry secrets through the walls. Rain continued tapping softly against the windows while the grandfather clock downstairs counted each passing hour like a warning. I sat near the fireplace wrapped in a blanket. I had not realized I was clutching too tightly until my fingers began to ache. The message on the wall kept replaying in my mind. He always chooses the wrong woman in the end. Something about those words felt personal. Not angry. Almost sad. A soft knock startled me just after 2 a.m. I froze instantly. Claire. A female voice whispered through the door. Open it before they see me. Sophia. I hesitated before unlocking the door carefully. She slipped inside immediately wearing a dark silk robe, her blonde hair loose around her shoulders. Up close, she looked different tonight.
Less. Polished.
More exhausted. Her eyes moved quickly toward the hallway before she shut the door behind her. You should not be here, I whispered. Neither should you. Her gaze drifted toward the fire. But Damien never listens when it comes to women he wants to protect. You make it sound dangerous. Sophia laughed quietly. Everything about Damien Moretti is dangerous. She walked slowly around the room, fingertips brushing across the antique furniture, like she had memorized every corner years ago. How long have you known him? I asked carefully. 9 years. There was something painful hidden beneath the answer. Long enough to understand that every woman who gets close to him eventually loses something. Did you? Her eyes met mine for a brief second. I lost myself. Silence settled between us, while thunder rolled outside again. Sophia finally sat across from me near the firelight, her expression softer than I had ever seen downstairs at the dinner table. Claire, you need to understand something before tomorrow night. My stomach tightened instantly. Tomorrow night? If Damien gives you the ring again, the balance inside this house changes. What balance? Sophia leaned closer, lowering her voice. The wives are not here because of love. Each marriage represents an alliance. Political favors, business protection, family loyalty. Damien married women connected to powerful people because it kept his empire stable. And me? For the first time, genuine confusion crossed her face. That is exactly the problem. Nobody knows why you are here. The fire crackled softly between us. Damien has never chosen the same woman twice in a row, she continued quietly. Not once in 13 years. Cold spread through my chest. Why? Sophia looked toward the door like she was afraid the walls themselves might hear her. Because the last time he did, Evelyn disappeared 3 days later. My heartbeat stumbled painfully. You keep saying disappeared. What does that actually mean? Sophia opened her mouth to answer when the bedroom door suddenly swung open behind her. Damien stood there wearing a dark gray shirt with the sleeves rolled back slightly, rainwater still, clinging to his hair like he had just come in from outside. His expression turned instantly unreadable when he saw Sophia sitting beside me. Leave us, he said calmly. Sophia stood slowly. You should tell her the truth before someone else does. Damien's eyes hardened.
Now.
She exhaled softly before moving toward the door. As she passed him, she paused just long enough to whisper, You are starting to look at her the same way. Something dangerous flickered across Damien's face before disappearing again. Sophia walked out without another word. Silence filled the room immediately after she left. Damien closed the door carefully behind her and turned toward me. You should not listen to Sophia. I crossed my arms tightly. Then maybe you should stop giving me reasons to. He stared at me for several long seconds before speaking again. Claire, if I ask you to trust me tonight, will you? The question should have been simple. But standing there beneath the firelight with rain whispering against the windows and secrets hanging between us, trusting Damien Moretti suddenly felt like the most dangerous choice I had ever been asked to make. Trust is a dangerous thing when offered by a man like Damien Moretti. I realized that the moment he stepped closer and gently took the blanket from my trembling hands like he had already noticed, I was cold long before I admitted it myself. The firelight moved across his face in soft gold shadows, making him look less like the terrifying man who controlled the mansion and more like someone carrying exhaustion too heavy to hide anymore. You still have not answered me, he said quietly. Will you trust me tonight? I should have said no. Smart people would have said no. But nothing about Damien felt simple anymore. Not after the way he looked at me when he thought I was not paying attention. Not after the way his entire body changed whenever someone mentioned Evelyn. I do not know, I admitted softly. Something unreadable flickered across his expression before disappearing. He nodded once like honesty mattered more to him than reassurance. Fair answer. He moved toward the window, overlooking the storm outside. Rain streaked the glass while lightning flashed across the distant hills surrounding the estate. Claire, the women in this house believe love is weakness. And you? He was silent long enough that I thought he might ignore the question completely. I think love makes people careless. The answer should have sounded cold. Instead, it sounded personal. Painfully personal. I studied him carefully from across the room. What happened to Evelyn? Damien's shoulders stiffened almost imperceptibly. She betrayed me.
How?
Another pause. By making me believe she would not. The quiet honesty in his voice settled heavily in my chest. Before I could answer, his phone buzzed sharply in the silence. Damien glanced at the screen, and something dark immediately crossed his face. Stay here, he said. That sounds suspicious already. Unexpectedly, a faint smile touched his mouth again.
Small. Brief.
Dangerous because it made him look human. You are beginning to sound comfortable around me. That is probably a terrible sign for both of us. This time his smile lingered half a second longer before vanishing. Then he walked out, closing the door softly behind him. The moment he left, the room felt colder. Too quiet. I tried distracting myself by staring into the fire, but Sophia's words kept circling through my head. He has never chosen the same woman twice in a row. Somewhere beyond the walls of the mansion, thunder rolled again. Then I heard it. Footsteps outside my bedroom door.
Slow.
Careful. Not the steady pacing of guards. My stomach tightened instantly.
Damien.
I called softly. No answer. The footsteps stopped. Silence pressed against the room so heavily I could hear my own heartbeat. Then the doorknob moved. Once. Slowly. I stood up immediately, pulse racing. Who is there? Nothing. Another soft turn of the handle. My eyes darted toward the fireplace poker resting beside the hearth just as the bedroom lights flickered again. The door opened slightly. A shadow slipped inside. I took a step backward before realizing it was not Damien. It was the dark-haired wife who had walked out of dinner earlier. She closed the door quickly behind her and pressed one finger to her lips. Do not scream, she whispered urgently. Her breathing sounded uneven, almost panicked. You are in danger. Every instinct inside me screamed not to trust her. Who are you? Lena. Her eyes darted nervously toward the hallway. Listen carefully, because I cannot stay long. Damien is not the man you think he is. I crossed my arms tightly. Nobody in this house tells the truth long enough for me to know what to think. Then believe this. She stepped closer, lowering her voice even further. Evelyn did not betray Damien. Cold slid through my chest instantly. What? Lena swallowed hard. She tried to warn him. And when she disappeared, her voice cracked slightly. The wrong people took control of this house. My pulse pounded painfully in my ears. Who took control? Before she could answer, a sharp knock suddenly hit the bedroom door from outside. Damien's voice followed immediately.
Come.
Controlled. Claire, he said quietly. Open the door. Lena's face lost all color. Do not tell him I was here. Then, before I could stop her, she disappeared into the hidden passage behind the bookshelf. My hand was still trembling when I opened the bedroom door for Damien. He stepped inside immediately, tall and composed in the dim light, but his eyes searched the room too carefully for someone who claimed everything was under control. "Why did you take so long?" he asked quietly. I was asleep. The lie came too fast. His gaze held mine for several long seconds. He knew. Somehow, he always knew. But instead of pushing further, he walked deeper into the room and closed the door behind him softly. "There's going to be a change of plans tomorrow," he said. "You will stay beside me during the entire dinner." My stomach tightened. That sounds less like protection and more like painting a target on my back. A faint shadow of amusement crossed his face. "You are learning quickly." I folded my arms tightly. Lena was here. The reaction was instant. Damien's entire expression hardened, so suddenly the room felt colder. "What did she tell you?" "That Evelyn did not betray you." Silence. Heavy and immediate. Damien turned away from me for the first time since entering the room, jaw tightening sharply beneath the firelight. "You should not listen to Lena. Nobody in this house agrees on the truth. That is because truth becomes dangerous when power is involved." His voice sounded tired again. Older somehow. I stepped closer carefully. Did Evelyn really disappear?
He looked at me then.
And for the first time, I saw something crack beneath all that perfect control. Regret. It flashed through his eyes so quickly most people would have missed it. I did not. "I spent years believing she betrayed me," he admitted quietly. "Then one day, I realized the people whispering in my ear benefited the most from her disappearance." Cold spread slowly through my chest. "Sophia?" "Not Sophia." He moved toward the fireplace, staring into the flames like they held memories he hated. "Someone inside this family has been manipulating everything for years. The marriages, the alliances, the fear. Why marry so many women at all?" Damien laughed softly under his breath, but there was no humor in it, because powerful men are taught that loyalty can be purchased. The firelight caught the sharp lines of his face as he looked back at me. "I built this house around strategy, around control, around survival." His voice lowered slightly. "Then you walked in and started asking questions nobody else was brave enough to ask." My heartbeat stumbled painfully. "You barely know me. That is exactly why you are dangerous to me." The honesty in his voice hit harder than shouting ever could have. Before I could answer, another loud crash echoed somewhere downstairs. Damien instantly straightened, all softness vanishing from his face like it had never existed. His phone rang immediately after. He answered without taking his eyes off me. "What happened?" Silence while someone spoke on the other end. Then Damien's expression darkened dangerously. "Lock every entrance. Nobody leaves the estate." My pulse quickened. "What is it?" He ended the call slowly. "Someone poisoned Sophia's wine." The room tilted slightly beneath me. "Is she alive?" He exhaled sharply through his nose. "Barely." Fear crawled up my spine. "You think I was the target?" Damien did not answer right away. That silence was answer enough. Rain battered the windows harder now, wind rattling the glass like the storm itself wanted inside. I wrapped my arms around myself as panic slowly settled into my chest. "I should leave." Damien stepped toward me immediately. "No, someone in this house is trying to hurt people." "Exactly." His eyes locked onto mine with terrifying intensity. "And the moment you leave this mansion without my protection, whoever is behind this will stop pretending." My breathing turned uneven. "Damien." He reached out slowly, brushing one strand of hair away from my face with surprising gentleness. The contrast between his dangerous reputation and the softness of that touch almost hurt. "Claire," he said quietly, "you are safer beside me than anywhere else in the world right now." Then the bedroom lights flickered again.
Once. Twice.
Before the power died completely, plunging the room into darkness, while somewhere deep inside the mansion, a woman began screaming my name. The sound of my own name echoing through the dark mansion made every nerve in my body lock with fear. "Claire." The woman's voice sounded desperate. Terrified. Somewhere downstairs, doors slammed open while footsteps thundered through the hallways. Damien grabbed my wrist immediately, pulling me close enough that I could feel the steady heat of him even in the darkness. "Stay beside me," he said sharply. The emergency backup lights flickered on again, casting the bedroom in dim red shadows. Damien moved toward the door with controlled urgency, every movement precise despite the chaos spreading through the estate. I followed him into the hallway, where guards rushed past us, speaking rapidly into radios. The mansion no longer looked elegant. It looked unstable, like years of secrets were finally beginning to crack open all at once. Then I saw Sophia at the far end of the corridor wrapped in a cream-colored blanket, her blonde hair disheveled as two servants supported her carefully. Her face looked pale beneath the red lights, but her eyes locked onto mine instantly. "It was not meant for me," she whispered weakly. Damien's jaw tightened. "Enough." But Sophia shook her head slowly. "You still do not see it." Her gaze shifted toward me, with something almost like pity. They are trying to isolate her the same way they isolated Evelyn.
Cold flooded my chest.
Damien stepped between us immediately. "Take Sophia downstairs." The servants hurried her away, while the storm outside rattled every window in the mansion hard enough to sound like breaking glass. I looked up at Damien. What did she mean? "Not now." "Stop doing that." My voice came out sharper than I intended. "Every time something happens, you tell me half the truth and expect me to trust you anyway." He stared at me for one long second before exhaling quietly through his nose.
"Phoenix."
His voice dropped lower. "Evelyn tried to expose someone inside the family before she disappeared. Someone powerful enough to manipulate the marriages, the alliances, even me."
"Who?"
Another silence. "I do not know yet." I searched his face carefully, trying to decide whether I believed him. The terrifying part was that I did. Before either of us could speak again, a gunmetal gray security door suddenly slammed shut at the end of the hallway with a heavy metallic sound. Everyone froze. One of the guards cursed under his breath. "Sir, the West Wing just locked automatically." Damien's expression darkened instantly. "That system only activates during a breach." A second later, every television screen mounted throughout the hallway flickered to life at once. Static crackled loudly before a woman's face appeared. My breath caught painfully in my throat. She was beautiful. Dark hair, pale skin, sharp green eyes filled with sadness. Evelyn, the first wife. Damien went completely still beside me. "That is impossible," one of the guards whispered. The recording quality looked old, grainy around the edges, but her voice came through clearly enough to make the entire hallway fall silent. "If you are watching this," Evelyn said softly, "then Damien finally chose someone he actually cares about." My pulse stumbled. Damien's face lost all color. Evelyn looked directly into the camera with tears shining in her eyes. The danger was never outside this house. It was always inside it. Static flashed briefly across the screen. "Damien, if Claire is beside you right now, then you are already too late." The video suddenly cut out. Silence crashed over the hallway. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Then slowly, Damien turned toward me with an expression I had never seen on his face before.
Fear.
Real fear. Somewhere deep inside the mansion, an alarm began blaring through the walls. Red emergency lights flashed brighter overhead, while one of the guards shouted into his radio. "Sir, someone breached the private archives." Damien's eyes never left mine. "Claire," he said quietly, "there is something I should have told you the night you arrived." My heartbeat pounded violently as he stepped closer. "You were never supposed to become my wife." Thunder exploded outside at the exact moment the mansion went completely dark again. Darkness swallowed the hallway so completely that for one terrifying second, I forgot how to breathe. The alarms continued blaring through the mansion while rain slammed against the windows hard enough to shake the glass. Somewhere nearby, guards shouted instructions over radios, but all I could focus on was Damien's voice echoing inside my head. "You were never supposed to become my wife." The emergency lights flickered back on weakly, painting everything in red again. Damien reached for me immediately, his hand firm around my wrist, as he pulled me closer to his side. "Stay with me," he said sharply. "No." I shot back before fear could stop me. "You do not get to say something like that, and then act like nothing happened." His jaw tightened. Around us, security rushed through the corridors while servants disappeared behind locked doors like they had rehearsed this chaos before. "Claire," Damien said quietly, "this is not the time." "Then when is the time?" My voice cracked despite my effort to stay calm. Because from the moment I walked into this house, everybody has treated me like I accidentally stepped into somebody else's story. His eyes locked onto mine. Ice blue. Exhausted. Honest in a way that scared me more than lies. "Because you did." The words hit harder than I expected. He glanced toward the security monitors flashing static at the end of the hallway. Before lowering his voice, "Your name was never part of the arrangement." "What arrangement?" Damien exhaled slowly. "The woman selected to become the next Moretti wife was supposed to be connected to the Valeni family. Political alliance. Protection. Predictable. And instead you chose me." "No," his expression darkened slightly. "You were sent to the wrong meeting entirely." My stomach dropped. "What?" "3 months ago, your bookstore applied for emergency financial relief through one of the Moretti charities." I stared at him in confusion. "How do you know about that?" "Because I approved it personally." Rain rattled the windows again while distant thunder rolled over the estate. Damien stepped closer, voice quieter now. "Claire, you were never supposed to end up inside this world. But when I saw your file, something felt wrong." "My file?" "No debts connected to organized families. No political ties. No history of manipulation. You looked," he paused briefly, "real." My pulse stumbled painfully. "So what happened?" Damien's expression hardened again. "Someone altered the records, changed the names, redirected the contracts." Cold spread through my chest. "Meaning somebody wanted me here?" "Yes." Silence crashed between us while alarms continued flashing red across the walls. Suddenly, the entire situation felt bigger than jealousy between wives or secrets hidden inside hallways. This had been planned.
Carefully.
Deliberately. Who would do that? I whispered. Damien looked away briefly, and for the first time since meeting him, uncertainty crossed his face. "I think Evelyn discovered the answer before she disappeared." Before I could respond, one of the guards rushed toward us breathing hard. "Sir, the private archives were not breached." Damien frowned sharply. "Then why did the alarm trigger?" The guards swallowed nervously. "Because somebody opened the underground passage beneath the archives." Every muscle in Damien's body went still. That tunnel was sealed years ago. Apparently not. Fear crawled slowly up my spine. "What tunnel?" Damien did not answer immediately. His eyes remained fixed somewhere beyond me like memories were dragging him backward. Against his will. Finally, he looked at me again. "There is another part of this mansion nobody talks about." Of course there was. "Damien, Evelyn used to call it the Ghost Wing." Lightning flashed violently outside, illuminating the hallway for one bright second before darkness swallowed everything again. Then, through the static-filled security speakers overhead, a woman's voice suddenly whispered softly through the mansion. "Damien, she is finally here." My blood turned ice cold. Because the voice sounded exactly like Evelyn. The hallway went completely silent after the voice disappeared from the speakers. Even the guards stopped moving for one stunned second like the mansion itself had just whispered from the grave. I stared at Damien, waiting for him to say it was fake. Some recording, some trick. But the look on his face destroyed that hope immediately. He looked shaken, not confused, not doubtful. Shaken like a man hearing a ghost call his name after years of trying to forget it. "That was her," he said quietly, almost to himself. My pulse pounded painfully. "You said Evelyn disappeared." Damien slowly turned toward the dark security monitor mounted on the wall. Static flickered across the screen before briefly clearing. For half a second, I saw a woman standing in a long corridor beneath the mansion. Pale face, dark hair. Then the image vanished again. One of the guards crossed himself under his breath. Another looked ready to quit on the spot. Sir, he whispered nervously. Damien's jaw tightened sharply. Open the lower passage. Sir, with respect, nobody has entered the ghost wing in years. Open it. The command cracked through the hallway instantly. Nobody argued again. I grabbed Damien's arm before he could walk away. You are seriously telling me there is an underground section of this mansion where your missing wife might still be alive? He looked down at my hand, gripping his sleeve. Something softened briefly in his expression before disappearing again. Claire, I need you to stay upstairs. Absolutely not. It is dangerous. Everything in this house is dangerous. The words came out sharper than I intended, but I was too overwhelmed to care anymore. Damien studied me for several long seconds while red emergency lights flashed across his face. Then, unexpectedly, he nodded once.
Fine.
Stay close to me. The ghost wing entrance was hidden behind the library. One of the guards unlocked an old iron gate concealed behind shelves filled with leather-bound books that probably cost more than my bookstore earned in a year. Cold air rushed upward from the darkness below, carrying the scent of dust, stone, and something older I could not place. The staircase spiraled deep beneath the mansion while weak overhead lights flickered uncertainly. Damien walked beside me in silence, one hand resting lightly against my lower back like he was making sure I stayed near him without drawing attention to it. The deeper we descended, the colder the air became. Why seal this place? I whispered. Damien kept his eyes forward. Because after Evelyn vanished, strange things started happening down here. That is not an answer. It is the only one I have. We finally reached the bottom level where a narrow stone corridor stretched ahead beneath low ceilings lined with antique chandeliers that no longer worked. Portraits covered the walls, even down here. More wives. More elegant smiles, hiding lonely eyes. Then I noticed something horrifying. Every portrait after Evelyn's looked unfinished. Like the artists had stopped before completing them. My stomach twisted uneasily. Why are the paintings incomplete? Damien slowed slightly beside me. Because after Evelyn disappeared, nobody stayed long enough to finish one. The words settled heavily in my chest. Somewhere ahead, soft piano music drifted faintly through the corridor. Beautiful, delicate, completely impossible. Every guard froze instantly. Sir, one whispered nervously. Damien's entire body tensed beside me. Evelyn used to play piano every night. Lightning flashed faintly through tiny ground-level windows near the ceiling, illuminating the corridor in cold silver light for one brief second. At the far end of the hall, I saw a woman standing beside a white piano. Long dark dress. Pale hands resting on the keys. My breath caught painfully. She turned slowly toward
us.
Not fully. Just enough for me to glimpse sharp green eyes filled with sadness before the lights flickered again. And suddenly she was gone. The piano music stopped immediately after. Silence rushed into the corridor so heavily it hurt my ears. Then softly, from somewhere behind us, a woman whispered near my shoulder. Claire, he still does not know who betrayed him. I spun around instantly. Nobody stood there. But Damien's face had gone completely pale. Damien had built an empire around fear, but standing in that underground corridor beneath the mansion, I realized there was one thing capable of frightening him more than enemies. The truth. The guards searched the hallway with flashlights while rainwater dripped softly through old stone overhead. Nobody spoke above a whisper anymore. Even the air felt heavy down there, like the walls had been holding secrets too long. Damien stepped closer to me slowly, his expression tight beneath the weak lights. Did you hear that voice clearly? He asked quietly. I nodded once. She said you still do not know who betrayed you. His jaw flexed sharply. Evelyn used to say things exactly like that. One of the guards approached nervously. Sir, there is something you should see. He led us farther into the ghost wing where the corridor opened into an old sitting room covered in white sheets and dust. A massive chandelier hung overhead, frozen in time above antique furniture nobody had touched in years. But the dust on the floor had fresh footprints crossing through it. My pulse quickened immediately. Someone had been down here recently. Damien crouched near the floor, studying the marks carefully. Small shoes, he murmured. A woman. Then his eyes lifted slowly toward the fireplace. Every muscle in his body locked instantly. I followed his gaze and felt my breath leave my lungs. A portrait hung above the mantel. Evelyn. But unlike the other paintings upstairs, this one looked alive somehow. Finished. Detailed. Her green eyes seemed almost painfully real beneath the cracked varnish. And across the bottom of the frame, someone had written a message recently in elegant cursive handwriting. She tried to save you.
Damien.
Stared at the words without moving. The room went completely silent around us. Sir, one of the guards whispered carefully. Damien ignored him. Slowly, he stepped closer to the painting like he could not stop himself. I watched her disappear, he said quietly. I searched for months. His voice sounded hollow now.
Lost.
I buried what was left of her scarf beside the lake.
Cold spread through my chest.
What if there was never a body to bury? The question hit him visibly. His shoulders stiffened while thunder rolled somewhere above us through layers of stone. Before he could answer, a soft creaking sound echoed from the far side of the room. Everyone turned sharply. One of the old wooden doors hidden beside the bookshelf had slowly swung open by itself. Darkness waited beyond it. The guards exchanged nervous glances immediately. That room was sealed, one muttered. Damien stepped toward the doorway first, but I caught his sleeve before he entered. Do not go alone. His eyes met mine, softer now despite the tension surrounding us. You should stay back. I am done staying back. Something almost proud flickered briefly across his expression before disappearing again. We entered together. The hidden room looked untouched for years. Dust covered everything except one small wooden desk positioned beneath a narrow window where rain tapped softly against the glass. A single lamp rested there beside stacks of old journals. My heartbeat sped up instantly. Damien reached the desk first. His hand trembled slightly as he picked up the top journal. Evelyn's handwriting, he whispered. He opened the first page slowly, while everyone crowded behind us in silence. The ink had faded slightly with time, but the words remained clear enough to read beneath the weak flashlight beams. If Damien ever finds us, it means they failed to erase me completely. My pulse hammered painfully. Damien turned the page faster now. More writing filled every line. Names.
Dates.
Meetings. Secret alliances inside the Moretti family. Then suddenly his breathing stopped completely. No, he whispered. I moved closer carefully. One sentence had been underlined heavily across the center of the
page.
The person controlling the marriages was never one of Damien's enemies. It was someone he loved like family. Silence crashed through the room again. Slowly, Damien lifted his eyes from the journal toward the doorway behind us. Someone stood there watching. Sophia. Sophia stood in the doorway, wearing the same pale blanket around her shoulders, but something about her looked different now. Not weak. Not frightened.
Calm.
Too calm for a woman who had supposedly just survived an attempt on her life. Rain echoed faintly through the underground tunnels, while every guard in the room slowly shifted their attention toward her. Damien remained perfectly still beside the desk, Evelyn's journal clenched tightly in one hand. Sophia, he said quietly. Her eyes moved from the journal to his face. You finally found it. The softness in her voice hurt more than anger would have. I looked between them, my pulse racing painfully. You knew this room existed. Sophia gave a faint smile, without humor. Of course I did. Evelyn showed it to me years ago. Damien's jaw tightened sharply. Then why keep it hidden? She looked at him for a long moment before answering. Because the truth would have destroyed you. Silence crashed through the room. The guards looked uncertain now, caught between loyalty and confusion. Sophia stepped farther into the hidden room while weak flashlight beams trembled slightly across the walls. You spent 13 years believing enemies outside the family were manipulating your marriages, she said softly. But Evelyn figured it out before anyone else. The problem was never outside the mansion. Damien's voice turned dangerously quiet. Who? Sophia's eyes filled slowly with something heartbreaking. Regret. Your brother. Cold spread instantly through my chest. Damien looked like someone had physically struck him. Marco is dead. No, Sophia shook her head once. Marco disappeared because Evelyn helped him disappear. The room tilted around me. Damien stared at her in stunned silence while thunder rolled through the stone corridors overhead. "That is impossible," one of the guards whispered. Sophia laughed softly under her breath. "That family loves the word impossible. It is how they hide the truth." She moved closer to Damien slowly now, tears gathering in her eyes. "Marco was terrified of becoming like your father. Ruthless. Obsessed with control. He discovered the marriage alliances were being used to strengthen people inside the organization who wanted complete power over the city." Damien's breathing sounded uneven for the first time since I met him. "Why would Evelyn help him leave?" "Because she loved both of you." Sophia looked toward the portrait hanging above the fireplace outside the hidden room. She knew if Marco exposed the corruption publicly, the family would destroy him. My heart pounded painfully. "So Evelyn disappeared to protect him?" Sophia nodded slowly. She staged her own disappearance. Only a few of us knew. Damien closed his eyes briefly, like the weight of 13 lost years had suddenly collapsed onto his shoulders all at once. "You let me believe she was dead." Sophia's voice broke softly. "Because Evelyn begged us to. She thought distance was the only thing that could keep you alive." Silence swallowed the room again. I looked at Damien and realized something devastating. Beneath all the power, all the fear, all the control, he had spent years grieving someone who had never truly abandoned him. Sophia wiped at her eyes carefully before looking toward me. "Claire was never meant to become another wife." Damien lifted his gaze sharply. Sophia continued softly. "Evelyn chose her." My breath caught painfully. "What?" Sophia looked directly at me. "Evelyn followed your bookstore for months through the charity foundation. She said you reminded her of the version of Damien that existed before this house poisoned him." Damien stared at me like he was seeing me differently for the first time. "She altered the records herself," Sophia whispered. "Not to trap you here. To save him." Emotion flickered across Damien's face so raw and unguarded it almost hurt to witness. Then suddenly, footsteps echoed rapidly through the corridor outside. One of the guards turned sharply toward the entrance. "Sir." Fear filled his voice instantly. "There is someone coming." The lights overhead flickered violently again. And from somewhere deep inside the ghost wing, a man's voice echoed softly through the darkness. "Damien, it has been a long time, brother. Every wife wanted the Mafia boss tonight, but one secret changed everything. If you think this is just a marriage of power, you're wrong." Inside the Moretti mansion, every glance hides a secret. Every wife wanted Damien Moretti. But that night, one buried truth changed everything forever. Who will disappear before sunrise? Why did Damien choose her? And what does the black ring truly mean? Like this video if you love emotional Mafia romance stories. Subscribe to the channel so you never miss the next episode. Share this story to support Mafia's Sweet Love Story Studios. Part 2 will be darker, more dangerous, and impossible to stop watching. Because some secrets, once revealed, destroy entire empires. Sometimes the most dangerous woman is the one nobody noticed.